Hey guys, it's the Nerd Guy Reviews friend, and today I'm going to be ranking all 23 films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I've always been a huge fan of the MCU, but have never actually shared my rankings with the internet. Recently, I did a big Marvel rewatch where I watched an MCU movie a day for 23 days. After I finished, I ranked all 23 movies. Once I heard my friend was starting his new YouTube channel, I thought it was a great opportunity, and I asked if I could come on the channel and talk about Marvel. I plan to make more film-related videos, and I appreciate if you guys could comment what film rankings you'd want to see. I'm a big Star Wars fan, and I could do some Star Wars rankings. Also, I made an MCU-themed Kahoot with one question from each Marvel movie. I will leave the link in the description if anyone wants to play it. Comment your score down below. This list isn't the perfect list, it's just my list, and I would love to hear yours. We all love the MCU, let's keep it friendly down there in the comments section. Okay, without further ado, let's begin. Coming in last place is The Incredible Hulk. This is the black sheep of the MCU because it doesn't even feel like a Marvel movie. There's no humor, it's not fun. Edward Norton plays a much darker, less likable Bruce Banner. This was easily the hardest to rewatch. I was bored the whole time. There's very little dialogue, and the action sequences aren't entertaining because the CGI is terrible. Betty Ross is bland, and the Abomination is forgettable. Put it all together, and you have a poorly made movie with some serious problems. So it comes in last place. In 22nd place is Thor: The Dark World. I think the fandom has agreed that this is probably the worst Marvel movie. I don't quite think it's the worst Marvel movie, but it's pretty bad. It's constantly switching through genres. Like, sometimes it feels like a romance, sometimes it feels like a buddy comedy, sometimes it feels like Lord of the Rings in space. But what really brings this movie down is Malekith, the worst Marvel villain ever. He's given zero defining traits to set him apart from the thousands of other dark elves. He has no personality or motivation. The only reason I didn't put this movie in last place is Loki. Tom Hiddleston does a great job being charming and entertaining, and I think this movie was made a little better by Endgame. In 21st place is Thor. Now this movie has some great aspects. Kenneth Branagh brings a sense of Shakespearean grandeur to the film, and the special effects look pretty good for the budget they had in 2011. There are some really good action sequences, but the problem is there's not enough action sequences. The movie slows to a halt once Thor gets to Earth. I'm also not a huge fan of Natalie Portman's character, Jane Foster. I don't really buy into the fact that Thor is over 1,000 years old and he's never found love, but he gets together with Jane over the course of a long weekend. There's nothing really bad about this film, but I don't really like anything about it either. In 20th place is Iron Man 2. There's some good things about this movie. Obviously, Robert Downey Jr. is amazing, as always, and Sam Rockwell and Scarlett Johansson are both fun additions to the film. But this is easily the weakest Iron Man film. Jon Favreau needed 3 years to make this film, but they only gave it 2. And it shows. This movie jumps from plot point to plot point and suffers from way too many plot lines. You have the Stark Expo, Whiplash's revenge on Tony, the government wanting the Iron Man suits, Tony's rival Justin Hammer and Hammer Industries, Tony's heart poisoning, setting up the Avengers. There are only 3 action sequences in this entire movie. And Whiplash is one of the worst Marvel villains. I wanted to love this movie, but there's not much to like. In 19th place is Doctor Strange. Now, this isn't a bad film by any means. The visual effects look beautiful. Benedict Cumberbatch does a wonderful job as Doctor Strange. Tilda Swinton also is great in the role of the Ancient One. Despite my praising of the film, it definitely has some problems. First of all, Caecilius is a terrible villain. He's just kind of one of Dormammu's henchmen and doesn't even get a cool final battle. This movie has some pacing issues, and I do find it pretty boring most of the time. Stephen Strange feels like a knockoff Tony Stark, but without the charisma of Robert Downey Jr., so he's just kind of a jerk. Again, it's not a bad movie, but I don't particularly like it either. In 18th place is Captain Marvel. Disclaimer, I have nothing against Brie Larson or female superheroes. Absolutely zero bias. This is by far the most controversial Marvel movie. There are some people that just can't stand this movie for ridiculous reasons. But there are some valid points for why it's not a great movie, and I think people need to understand there's a lot of people who don't just dislike it because Captain Marvel is a girl. Rant aside, there's some things I like about this movie and things I don't like. So we'll start with the good and move on to the bad. First of all, the best thing about this movie is Fury. Not only did they do such a good job of de-aging him, but in my opinion, this is Sam Jackson's best performance. It's so fun to see a less cynical Nick Fury. Second, I thought Goose was a great addition to the film. In fact, I even named my own cat Goose. Also, I love the 90s soundtrack. Moving on to the bad, I really hate Young Rod. He's one of my least favorite characters in the MCU. My main problem with the film, though, is how ill-defined Captain Marvel is. Not only does she have no memory, which doesn't give her much personality, they also don't do a great job of defining her power level. Like, during the final battle, she's beating up the Kree, but she's not killing them. A couple minutes later, she is literally destroying spaceships. This is definitely an entertaining movie, but I have issues with it. In 17th place is Captain America the First Avenger. I absolutely love Captain America's origin story. You have all these other origin stories where someone with powers has to overcome their central personality flaw. But with Captain America, the flaw is his body. His heart is pure. The supporting cast is great. I love Bucky and maybe Peggy even more. Hashtag Watch Agent Carter, it's on Disney+. However, this movie montages through World War II, which could have been really interesting. There's also some pacing issues, and I feel bored a little bit. Red Skull isn't a particularly compelling villain either. The end result is a movie that should be way higher on this list, but they didn't handle some elements right. In 16th place is Ant-Man. Now, I enjoy this film a great extent. In fact, I don't think there's anything bad about this film, except maybe another villain problem. Paul Rudd is hilarious, and Michael Peña's Luis is one of the funniest characters in the MCU. He, Dave, and Kurt steal the show whenever they're on screen. The concept of Ant-Man is interesting, and it's pretty surprising Marvel pulled it off, judging by how lesser-known Ant-Man is in the comics. At the same time, the film doesn't really tie into the MCU that much, and as fun as it doesn't feel important in the big picture. In 15th place is Iron Man 3. Now, a lot of people really dislike this film, and I've never really disliked it that much. People have two main problems with it. One, the conclusion is meaningless, because Iron Man is back in a suit in Age of Ultron with no explanation. And two, the Mandarin twist. Now, I never really read the comics, so the Mandarin twist didn't offend me as much as other people. I still didn't like it. Shane Black wanted to subvert our expectations, but he didn't give us something better. He just gave us something different. However, I think this movie has some great moments. I love the dialogue in general, and especially between Tony and Harley Keener. The action sequences are phenomenal, especially the final battle, where Tony is jumping from Iron Man suit to Iron Man suit. I love a lot of things about this film, even though there are some serious problems. In 14th place is Avengers Age of Ultron. This is easily the weakest Avengers film. It's confusing, it's fast-paced, and it has a poor villain. Very similar to Iron Man 3, even though it's a bad film, it still has some great moments. Obviously, the addition of the Maximoff twins is great. I love Quicksilver's character arc, and found his death meaningful. The sequence where everyone tries to lift Mjolnir is one of the best scenes in the MCU. As an Avengers film, there's great banter and fun action sequences. I wish I could rank this movie higher, but I can't ignore its central issues. In 13th place is Ant-Man and the Wasp. When I saw this movie in theaters, I absolutely adored it. It was in my top 5. I don't think it's aged very well. I still find it to be one of the funniest films in the MCU, which is probably why I liked it so much. But now I can acknowledge it has a serious villain problem, and the action sequences aren't very good. The third act doesn't feel like a final battle. However, it did do a great job setting up the quantum realm for Avengers Endgame, and Michael Peña could not be more perfect. In 12th place, I have Captain America the Winter Soldier. This movie is nearly perfect. It's a fun political thriller with some of the best action sequences in the MCU. The bridge fight scene, of course, being the highlight. Scarlett Johansson does an incredible job and has great chemistry with Chris Evans. The introduction of Falcon was a great addition to the film, and I love the On Your Left sequence to death. My two problems with the film are I don't like Alexander Pierce, and I find myself occasionally bored. Still, I absolutely love this film. In 11th place is Spider-Man Homecoming. This is a fun film because we get to see a high schooler's take on the MCU. Tom Holland is such a great Spider-Man because he's so fun and full of energy as Spider-Man, and he's so good at showing serious emotion as Peter Parker. This is definitely one of Robert Downey Jr.'s best performances because of his relationship with Peter. You really get to see him be a mentor and a father, and he doesn't just want Peter to be good, he wants him to be better than he was, and not make the same mistakes that he did, and that's powerful. Vulture is one of the best villains because he doesn't have a big master plan to blow up the world. He's just a guy trying to provide for his family. I'm not a big fan of Liz, and the third act is pretty slow. Still, this movie is great. In 10th place is the original, Iron Man. First, Robert Downey Jr. is perfect. No one else could play Tony Stark. These are great iconic scenes. A handful were callbacks in Endgame. Yinsen's death is a perfect scene. Building the Iron Man suit, the I Am Iron Man scene, they're all great. I think Obadiah Stane is an underrated villain, and Jeff Bridges did a great job. They did a good job subtly setting up the MCU with Coulson and S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Nick Fury scene, which is my favorite post-credit scene. Robert Downey Jr. and Jon Favreau did a great job making this film that started the MCU. In 9th place is Thor Ragnarok. Taika Waititi revived the Thor franchise by pretty much making it Guardians of the Galaxy. It's funny, it's vibrant, and the characters are great. Korg is possibly the funniest character in the MCU. The Grandmaster is such a fun villain, and Jeff Goldblum's comedic timing is perfect. Despite all the comedy, this film shows a lot of powerful messages. Mainly that Asgard is not a place, it's a people. This is the film where Thor becomes insanely powerful and makes for a great final battle. This is a fun film made by one of the funniest, quirkiest directors in Hollywood. In 8th place is Black Panther. I don't think anyone guessed how well this movie would do. This movie became the highest grossing domestic superhero movie of all time. It received 7 Oscar nominees, including Best Picture, and won 3. It has the most powerful themes of any MCU movie. It's about a nation with high-tech technology, good enough to help oppress people all over the world, and 2 people with different worldviews arguing over what to do. That's why Killmonger is such a great villain. What he's doing is wrong, and he's the bad guy, but he has the right mindset. And he causes T'Challa to think differently, and ultimately decide to help the rest of the world in the end. Wakanda is thematically rich, and everything looks amazing. All the side characters are fun, like Shuri, Okoye, Nakia, and M'Baku. This is a perfectly made film and deserves all the praise it gets, and maybe Best Picture. In 7th place is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. This is probably the funniest film in the MCU. All the characters are quirky and hilarious in their own way. The jokes don't get old, and I laugh every time I watch this film. The soundtrack is amazing, and I listen to these songs more than any other soundtrack. The CGI looks great, and the whole movie is so colorful. My favorite thing about this film is the relationship between Yondu and Rocket, who both have huge character arcs. Rocket learns to accept the Guardians as his family and becomes less of a jerk to everyone. Yondu has the best redemptive arc in the MCU, and he chooses to help the Guardians and sacrifices himself to save Quill. An absolutely heartbreaking scene. I never get bored of this fun, entertaining, hilarious film. In 6th place is Guardians of the Galaxy. This film blew everyone away. No one had ever heard of the Guardians of the Galaxy, much less a walking tree and a talking raccoon. This film was a breath of fresh air. It was hilarious. It was a blast. The soundtrack was phenomenal. This film is my favorite version of Star-Lord, and I think it was Chris Pratt's best performance, along with Drax and especially Groot. This film has some serious emotion. It's a story about a group of unlikely heroes coming together and going through character growth to become a part of the selfless team. From the final battle literally being the main character challenging the villain to a dance-off, to tears coming out of your eyes watching a giant tree say, "We are Groot," this movie is spectacular the whole way through. Kicking off the top 5 is Spider-Man Far From Home. I absolutely love this film. It's a hilarious epilogue to Endgame, which even makes a joke about the snap, showing the dusted basketball team showing up during a band concert. It deals with the loss of Tony Stark and the effect it has on Peter as well as the world, as everyone is asking, who's going to be the next Iron Man? This is where Mysterio comes in, who I love. Not only was it so interesting to me that Mysterio created Barf, but Jake Gyllenhaal does an amazing job, because when you think he's good, he's so likable and you love him. And then you find out he's evil, and he's making fun of Tony Stark, and you just absolutely hate him. I think they did a great job making the side characters fun and quirky, like Betty and Flash. I love how they used Happy, and my favorite scene in the movie was his and Peter's heart-to-heart, followed by Peter creating his new suit exactly like Iron Man used to, even with Iron Man's signature song, Black and Black. And the fun quote, "I love Led Zeppelin." In 4th place is The Avengers. When this movie came out, it was huge. There had never been such a huge crossover event between 4 different franchises. It's not just a great film because it's a huge crossover blockbuster. It's a good film in general. The banter is some of the best in the MCU, especially the dialogue between Tony and Steve. Loki is probably my favorite villain in the MCU, and he's at his best in this movie, using his wits instead of his fists to create a powerful threat. The 3rd act is epic and iconic, with the Avengers fighting the Chitauri, Tony's sacrifice, and Loki getting smashed by the Hulk. As a big Coulson fan, #watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. please, it's on Netflix please, his death meant so much to me, and it's what gave the team something to avenge. This movie has it all: iconic moments, heartfelt moments, fun moments, and when this movie came out, it was the best superhero film to date. Kicking off the top 3 is Captain America Civil War. This movie is incredible. Part of the reason it's so good is because it works. The conflict is 100% believable. It makes sense that the government would want to minimize collateral damage, and both Tony and Steve both have reason to be on the side they're on, and have such compelling arguments that neither side is even wrong. Tony knows he's made a lot of mistakes, and he feels guilty, so he doesn't think he can be responsible, and as a result is in favor of the Accords. Steve is a man out of time. He remembers what the world was like in the 1940s when things were less complicated, and believes that the safest hands are still their own, and that they can be responsible. The airport fight scene is perfect and a comic book nerd's dream come true. The action is great, the quips are fun, and the stakes are high. They managed to introduce Black Panther and Spider-Man in this movie, and are still able to juggle 10 other heroes. Once you get to the final fight, there's no big, world-ending consequences, but so much emotion. You have two friends who both feel betrayed by each other, duking it out in a very heartfelt scene where Steve even leaves his shield behind. I love everything about this movie. Our runner-up is Avengers Infinity War. There are 0 occasions where anyone could possibly be bored during this movie. It's non-stop action the whole time. It gives us some of the best action sequences in the MCU. Whether you're talking about the New York Phantom battle, Iron Man, Spider-Man, and Doctor Strange teaming up with the Guardians on Titan, Thor wielding Stormbreaker, the Battle of Wakanda, the action sequences are great the whole way through. You would think that it would be a pretty dark movie, but it's really funny. Most of the humor is characters meeting other characters for the first time, like why is Gamora, or we're using our made-up names, then I am Spider-Man, which doesn't sound great on paper, but it works. This movie juggled over 30 characters and it still feels natural. Thanos is a powerful villain, and his regular power combined with the Infinity Stones makes for some amazing fight scenes. The snap is one of the most shocking twists in movie history, and not only serves as a gut punch, but as a revelation. Our heroes lost because they were divided. If Civil War hadn't happened, they would have won. Infinity War is an epic, powerful movie that balances emotion and comedy, but despite how great it is, it's not my favorite Marvel movie. Right after I saw Infinity War in theaters, I went home and looked up Infinity War on Wikipedia. I read about the plot, and then I scrolled down a little until I saw one sentence. An untitled sequel will be released on April 26th of the next year. I had never been more hyped for anything in my life, and I didn't even know the name of the movie. I waited in anticipation for a year and saw Endgame on opening day. It instantly became my favorite movie of all time. They should just call this film Fan Service, the movie. It has the advantage of having 21 movies that came before it. They can go back in time to movies like The Avengers, Thor the Dark World, and Guardians of the Galaxy, which makes those films better. This film is littered with callbacks, whether you're talking about On Your Left or proof that Tony Stark has a heart. The last hour of this film is the best 60 minutes ever put on film. You have Captain America wielding Mjolnir and the heroes walking through portals are scenes that I know that everyone's entire theater cheered at. I also think this is Robert Downey Jr.'s best performance because these last 5 years have been the best of his life. He settled down with Pepper and had a daughter. Now he has to give that life up and sacrifice himself so that everyone else can be happy. I think this movie also delivers a great conclusion to Thor, Hulk, and Captain America's character arcs. Thor finally accepts he's not meant to be king and takes off with the Guardians. Hulk, after being overshadowed by his peers for the rest of the movies, makes peace between Banner and Hulk and snaps, even though it nearly kills him. Captain America goes back in time to live the life he's always wanted with Peggy. This movie is perfect in every sense of the word and is the definite best Marvel movie. I love it 3000. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. I love talking about movies, and I'd love to hear which movies you want me to rank next. Don't forget, if you want to play my Kahoot, the link is in the description. Feel free to comment your score. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time with another video.